I grew up in a small suburban town in Michigan. My parents' property bordered a state forest that was typically pretty deserted. Growing up, I was not allowed to go into those woods. By the time I was 15 years old in the late 90s, I was far from naive. I had a job as a cashier in town, and in the summer both of my parents and my older siblings worked days, so there was no one around to give me a ride to work. If I wanted to get to my job, which started in the afternoon every day, I had to walk. If I travelled the roads, they took me out of the way and met at right angles, so it was 3 or more miles into town. But if I cut through the secluded woods and followed the train tracks into town, it was only about 2 miles and significantly cooler, a bit flatter and with less sun. Ignoring my gut, I took the same shortcut at the same time every day. Big mistake. The shortcut was a deer trail through dense woods and rolling terrain which went on for about a mile until it intersected the train tracks which went directly into town. By the time I get to the train tracks, I was a long way from any houses, just woods in all directions. One day, I was alone and deep into the woods on my own to work when I heard change jingling. I put my hands on my pockets and stopped walking. The chain jingling lasted for a brief second longer and then stopped. I couldn't tell which direction the sound was coming from because of all the little hills and the dense trees, but it sounded very close. Thinking, or perhaps just wishing I might be imagining the sound, I tried again, and started walking until I heard the chain jingling, then put my hands on my pockets, and I stopped walking abruptly. Again, I heard the chain jingle for a second more before it stopped. I knew right then and there that I was being stalked. The train track and thus a clearing was maybe 100 feet ahead and up a steep embankment. My instincts told me to walk fast but not to run and not to look behind me. I sensed that there was someone immediately behind me, but my heart was racing, and I had no time to process information. I walked as fast as my little legs could go. There was no point in screaming for help. No one would have heard me. Then there was something on the trail ahead of me. Laying on the path was a page ripped from a porn magazine of a woman spread eagle. I didn't get a great look at it as I power walked over it, but later, thinking about it, I recalled the page was crisp and laid out carefully on the path facing my direction. It was not there the day before, and it was not wilted. Someone had placed it there, anticipating my arrival. They had probably been watching me for days or weeks. Further down the path were more pages set out like some sort of pornographic breadcrumb trail. I walked right past the magazine pages. Finally, I made it to the steep embankment along the tracks. I climbed for my life. When I got up to the train tracks, I ran. Only then did I look back into the woods. As I was running in the bright sunlight now, my eyes had a hard time seeing down below into the shadows of the woods, but I saw something big move and heard twigs breaking. I just kept running. It was a good half a mile from that point to the closest road that passed over the tracks. As I got closer to town, there were more houses and people, so eventually I calmed down. I never reported the incident, and I did not tell my parents about it until years later, because I thought I'd be grounded for going to the woods. I never took the shortcut again. It was the summer of my 10th grade year. Hormones were high, stress was even higher. Boys, homework and the internet. That's what my life basically consisted of. And when summer finally rolled around, I seized the chance I had when both of my parents were at work. Brother was in summer reading school. I threw on a light, some hiking boots, and I set out for the woods at the end of my street. To give some background, the woods weren't very big, maybe half a mile thick with a river between each shore, 5 miles in length. That was my safe haven, and I was always calm when I was there. Except this time, I wish I hadn't gone. I didn't really have a set destination, so I just started walking down the path. I had gone maybe a mile when I heard footsteps behind me. Naturally, I turned around only to see 3 burly guys with 2 dogs. I shrugged this off, shot them a smile, and got off the trail so they could pass me. Dog walkers weren't really any cause for alarm, so I shrugged it off. I headed down a handmade trail towards a small fort a few of the neighborhood kids had built. I was walking around the structure and spent about 20 minutes just enjoying the sunshine and the silence. I heard branches snapping and turned, hoping it was maybe a deer, but instead, I see the same guys picking their way through the woods from behind me. Mind you, I was staring at the fort, and these guys had taken another path. I watched them for a moment, wondering if maybe they were teaching their dogs something. Again, it wouldn't be the first time. Instead, they were staring directly at me. I got up and grabbed my jacket and headed back towards the main path, a red flag going up as I turned to see the 3 guys walking after me. I turned onto the path and took a deep breath. I started at a slow jog. I wanted to get to a place I knew I could hide. I couldn't go home. They were blocking the path towards my house. I heard them reach the path, and then raised voices and pounding feet. I picked up my pace until I was sprinting down the path. I took a sharp turn and slid down a steep incline and sprinted into a place me and my friends used to call the dunes. It was a sandpit bordering the river. I could hear them cursing and howling as they struggled to get down the incline, their dogs growling, and a thought from who knows where came to my mind, that if I hid, they could always set their dogs on me, and I'll be helpless to protect myself. I turned to my next option, a thick tree that had bridged the river. There was no way they could possibly get their dogs across that. I had a mad dash towards the tree before freezing, weighing my options in a vain hope that they hadn't followed me. They did. I scrambled up onto the tree and began crawling towards the other shore. I heard shouting and turned to see the guys still trying to get their dogs up onto the log. I landed on the shore and spun, breathing hard. They were shouting curse words at me, and one even threatened to kill me. In my stupidity, I had forgotten my cell phone at home, and I inwardly cursed. Soon, the guys left with their dogs, and I stayed there until dark, just to make sure they were gone. I don't know what I had done to them for them to do what they did, and I'm thankful that I knew the paths well enough to see my own life. I was 14 years old, staying with a friend for several weeks while my mum was working out of state around Christmas. My friend Rosie lived in a small community, kind of set up like a mini subdivision. Her house was the only one in the back, butted up against the woods. Her room was at the front of the house, facing the street. We had lots of friends here, a few older guys who were known for teasing us in a playful manner, but they were like big brothers. About 3 days into my stay, I kept waking up super late at night to this weird scratching sound by her window, on the left side of the house by the woods. Her house was like thinly sided, so it was fairly loud. I remember brushing it off, telling myself, it's just a branch or something. Each night, the scratching grew a little louder, and also tapping and scratching on her window. At this point, it was waking her up as well. We saw a silhouette of a person pass the window, like they were crouching. We were frozen and could hear the slow crunching of leaves and gravel. We thought it was one of the boys messing with us, we told each other, even though I think we both knew it wasn't, as they had never done anything like this before. Their teasing was limited to tugging our bra straps and other dumb teenage boy crap. The next morning, we went over to the boys' house pretty pissed off, and flat out asked them why they were messing with us. They looked pretty confused and denied it. They did offer to keep a lookout for us. That night, we went to bed a little later than we usually did, because we were freaked out. The scratching and tapping on the glass turned into a hideous scraping sound on the window, like someone was trying to pry the window open with a knife. We threw something at the window, an empty plastic cup I think, and we definitely heard someone run into the woods. We woke up her dad, who was much older, and he called the police. Her window screen had been cut, and there were gouges in the metal trim. Police searched the woods for a little while and found nothing. We slept in the living room after that, and her dad put those little sticky alarms on all the windows and doors. Nothing else happened for about a week. We were going to spend the night at another friend's house in the neighborhood, and went to get our backpacks and stuff and walked out the front door. As we were almost to the road, Rosie remembered she had forgotten something and ran back inside. It was around 5 p.m. and the sun was just setting. Well, I stood in the backyard facing the house waiting for her. She had a mini shed right at the back of her house, super close to the house and woods. As I'm watching the door, I hear heavy footsteps from behind the house, and this guy comes out from behind the shed, halfway hidden, and just stands there. He had on a huge parka-like jacket, and it was getting dark, so I couldn't see his face. It took a few seconds to put everything together, that this was probably the creepy arsehole who had been terrorizing us, and I took off, sprinting. I ran track in junior high and always placed first in the 100-meter dashes, so I ran like a fucking lunatic to the boys' house. Out of breath, having an anxiety attack and freaked out, I told them what just happened. All of the boys were there, and there is no other way to their house than the way that I went, so at this point I knew something was up. They got pretty upset, told me to stay there and went to check out the shed. I called Rosie and told her what had happened and to call the cops and stay inside. After what seemed like forever, the boys came back. and in their hands they had pictures of me and my friend Rosie walking around the neighborhood, the bedroom window, getting in the car, all from the woods. Cops took hours this time. They took the photos and said they would look into it. I refused to go back to her house after that and ended up going to my grandparents a few hours away. This happened when I was 16 years old and living in Kolkata, India, in a building that had 3 floors and had 1 flat on each floor. It was not really secure. We had a security guard downstairs, but he was drunk most of the time, and since he was old, we didn't bother firing him. It was the end of summer and someone rang our doorbell one afternoon and my younger brother opened it. It was a man saying,
"Do you want me to sculpt a Ganesha idol for you?"
Ganesha is a Hindu god. My brother politely said no and closed the door. We didn't think much about him that day. It became a habit with this guy. He would show up at the same time every afternoon asking the same question and getting a negative response from either my mum, my brother or me. Since he usually left and was extremely polite, we never reported him. Then he stopped coming. He did not come for the next 2 days, and we forgot about him. The monsoon season had begun by that time. It rained heavily almost every day. I loved going to my roof to get drenched in the rain. One afternoon, it was raining and I decided to go up to the roof. There is a huge cupboard at the corner of the stairs which led to the roof, where we kept some household supplies. I went onto the roof, and after 45 minutes of rain-soaked fun, I stepped out. I was dripping wet and soaked the stairs with my wet clothes and feet. I decided to wipe off the water from the stairs and opened the cupboard to look for a mop. As I opened it, I saw someone sitting inside. I screamed. It was the idol guy. He calmly said he was busy making Ganesha idols for us and I should join him, and he tried to grab my hand. I slammed the cupboard door shut and ran back downstairs. Nobody was home, so I called my mum and told her what happened. She called the police immediately. I waited in my wet clothes near my door, sitting in the puddle of rainwater my clothes had made. My heart was thumping. Soon, I heard the sirens and a couple of policemen rushed up to the flat and asked me what happened. I led them to the cupboard. The man had vanished. Only tiny bottles of alcohol and a blanket were inside. All of our supplies were gone. Maybe he threw those out to make room for himself. We were wondering where he might be, so we went up to the roof. It was still pouring outside. We went onto the roof, and there he was, completely naked. He was chanting with his arms out and chanting prayers, and encouraged us to join him. The policeman grabbed him and cuffed him. He was still smiling and chanting. He was asked several questions, but he just kept chanting. He was taken away by the police, and that was the last I saw of him. I never got to know the details of who he was. The police talked to my parents and said they had taken care of it, and he wouldn't bother us again. To this day, I'm still scared of opening cupboards, even if it's my own wardrobe, without tensing up. I know there are always rumors and urban legends about gang initiations. There is the car without the headlights on, and the Walmart shooting woman with the baby, and probably more. I was the victim of a gang initiation, and it wasn't nearly as clever or thought out, or for the lack of better word, interesting. I was walking home one Friday night from a friend's house. He lives only 4 blocks away, so it's a short walk. The neighborhood in which I live in is not that great of a part of a town, but having no car and not very helpful parents, I walk everywhere I go. Usually, when walking back from my friend's house, I walk home down Maple Street because it's more frequented by traffic, has a couple businesses that are open late, and it's better lit. But it's also a block further away. This night was cold. This only happened 3 weeks ago and I didn't want extra time walking, so I went down a side street named Jefferson. Jefferson Street is a neighborhood street. There are nothing but houses, and houses serving as apartments, which is part of the problem with the neighborhood. As I walk down the street, bundled up against the cold, I see 2 guys in their late teens standing just off the sidewalk in an alley. I knew immediately that something was up. They were black and I'm Asian, so I knew if I crossed the road they'd think it's because they were black. This isn't the reason. I wanted to cross the road because they were flagging for a local gang. I didn't cross the road though because there was the chance that they weren't going to bother me. I tucked my head down and started to walk past them, but as soon as I passed them, I got attacked from behind. True to stereotypes, I'm fairly advanced in karate. I fought back, knocking one attacker to the ground. I always carry a pocket knife on me for protection whenever I walk anywhere. So, with one of my attackers on the ground, I drew my knife. This was a mistake. The remaining attacker got me in a headlock from behind, and his body knocked the knife from my hand. While one held me, the other hit me. I managed to slip free and tried to run, but they caught me. The next thing that happened will scar me forever, and not just because I have the actual scar. One of my attackers picked up my knife and tried to cut my throat with it. I suffered a 3-inch cut across my windpipe, but the guy didn't press hard enough, and the knife didn't fully cut through my throat. With that attack over, my silence ran off and led me to die. Not more than 30 seconds after my throat was cut and my attackers fled, the cops arrived. Someone in one of the houses bordering the alley had seen what was happening and called the cops. An ambulance arrived shortly after, and I was taken to the hospital. For the most part, I was okay. I had, and still do, a nasty cut on my throat and a few bruises. The police caught both of my attackers a few streets from where I was attacked. They confessed it was a gang initiation and that they were supposed to kill someone. I was unlucky enough to be that someone, but I am very lucky too, because I'm alive.